Recording in progress.
The meeting of the Newark Planning Commission will come to order. Will you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For those individuals participating via Zoom this evening, when we get to the item that you wish to speak on, please use the raise the hand feature and city staff will turn on your microphones so that you can speak at the appropriate time. First order of business is roll call. Let the record show that all members of the Planning Commission are in attendance this evening with the exception of Commissioner Otterstetter, who's tending to a personal matter this evening. That brings us to item B, minutes, approval of the minutes of the regular Planning Commission meeting of April 12, 2022. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Okay, Commissioner Fitz makes the motion. Commissioner Bogasich seconds that. Can we vote? All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion 4 and 1 absent. Okay, that brings us to item C, written communications. Do we have any written communications this evening?
Not this evening.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is oral communications, giving anyone in the audience an opportunity to speak on anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Seeing not, do we have anybody wishing to speak on Zoom this evening?
We do not this evening.
Okay. That brings us to item E. I understand that staff has asked that we move item E down the agenda a little bit, and so we're going to move to staff reports, item F, and then we'll come back to the public hearings. So there is one item under staff reports. It's item F1. It's the presentation of 2022 to 2024 capital improvement plan and a finding that is in conformance with the city's general plan. Mr. Mayor, would you like to give the staff report this evening?
Sure. Good evening, Chairperson Becker, members of the Commission. My name is Jason Imai. I am the Assistant City Engineer with the Public Works Engineering Division. This is actually my first time presenting to this Commission in person. Since 2 years ago, when we presented the previous CIP, we were forced to do so virtually. So thank you for having me this evening. Tonight, I'll be providing an overview of the 2022-2024 Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP, for the purpose of determining its conformance with the general plan. The CIP is prepared as part of the city's biannual budget in order to identify and prioritize capital improvement projects for potential funding. So tonight's presentation of the 2022-2024 CIP will provide an overview of the capital improvement plan process, review CIP project selection methodology, provide a summary of the various funding sources, review the projects funded with the 2022-2024 CIP, and finally go over next steps. We would like this to be an open discussion, so please feel free to stop me along the way to ask questions. I'll also be pausing occasionally to ask if there are any questions from the Commission. So let's get started. The purpose of the CIP of each biannual budget is to identify and prioritize capital improvement projects for potential funding. Types of projects in the CIP can include street, park, and building construction, maintenance of existing facilities, feasibility studies and master plans, and new equipment purchases. And general projects or purchases that involve expenditures of $5,000 or more are included in the CIP. Exceptions to that include equipment that is replaced through the city's Equipment Replacement Fund. On the schedule, the CIP process began with a call for projects, which was distributed to all city departments back in November of last year. In March, staff presented to the City Council a comprehensive list of all projects submitted for consideration, but no specific recommendations for project funding were made at that time. In May, staff returned to the City Council with an update on the CIP, including revised budget forecasts and a list of projects recommended for funding. At that meeting, City Council approved the list of projects to be included in the 2022-2024 CIP for formal adoption with the biennial budget. This was followed by a City Council work session on May 26th to discuss this biennial budget and CIP, which brings us to tonight, where we will again provide an overview to the Commission of the CIP for the purpose of finding the CIP in conformance with the general plan. On June 23rd, the final 2022-2024 biennial budget and CIP document will be presented to the City Council for formal adoption. Next, I will briefly review the methodology used to select projects for inclusion in the CIP. The CIP project selection first involves an evaluation of each project against the critical issues contained in the city's strategic plan. So these critical issues include public safety services, education, quality of life, community development, and city government operations. Each project included in the CIP should align with or address one or more of those critical issues. So the critical issue that each project included in the CIP best aligns with is identified in the project descriptions contained in the document. Next, projects are assigned one of three priority levels. Priority level 1 are projects considered mandatory in order to either meet federal, state, local, or regulatory obligations, satisfy a critical risk management issue to ensure public safety, or to serve or preserve serve to preserve or protect an existing city asset. Priority level 2 projects are considered necessary, but not mandatory, as they do not address a critical legal, safety, or asset need, and may be funded as by a simple City Council consensus priority. Examples of priority level 2 projects include local matches needed to secure outside funding, projects which result in a service level increase, feasibility studies or master plans, or projects that represent the final phase of a multi-phase project. Priority level 3 projects are basically all other projects that are desirable, but do not satisfy either level 1 or level 2 criteria. Similar to the critical issues, the priority level assigned to each project is identified in the project descriptions contained in the CIP document. Now, after projects are assigned the priority level, they are then evaluated against available funding sources and finally reviewed for the level of staffing or maintenance that would be required. Again, the identified maintenance level of each project is also included in the project descriptions contained in the CIP document. Now, I will pause shortly at this time to ask if there are any questions regarding the overall process. If none, on to project funding. So staff utilized 5 general categories of revenue sources to fund the recommended projects in the 2022-2024 CIP. First up is gas tax funds, which includes all direct local distribution funds from the state and the Alameda County Transportation Commission. Typically, this is the type of funding can only be used for transportation projects within the public right-of-way. And we are currently projecting about $8.4 million of available gas tax funds over the 2-year CIP budget. Next, we have capital funds. Now, after reconciliation of the Civic Center project and identifying projects previously approved in the CIP that are no longer required, the estimated capital fund balance of the 2022-2024 biannual budget is $4.95 million. These are local funds that can be used for any type of project at the City Council's discretion. Next up are park impact fees, which can be used specifically for new park improvement projects. The city's balance of park impact fees currently stands at over $3.6 million. In addition, based on the amount of anticipated residential construction, staff projects an additional $4.3 million of park impact fees over the next 3 years. Now, next is use of community service facility fees is restricted to construction of new community service facilities identified in the 2017 Community Service Facilities Development Impact Fee Nexus Study. For example, the previously approved Civic Center expenditure plan included the use of community service facility fees. Now, after reconciliation of the Civic Center project budget, there will be a projected $854,000 of community service fees remaining. And lastly, community development maintenance funds may be used to pay for feasibility studies or master plans that are related to maintaining and updating the Newark general plan, zoning ordinance, or any other regulations. The estimated fund balance for community development maintenance funds beginning July 1st, 2022 is approximately $4 million. And I'll again pause quickly at this time to see if there's any questions regarding project funding.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
Did anybody else have a question? With the gas tax estimate for 2 years, we all know that gas prices have skyrocketed 50% over the last year alone. Do you think that number will go up as a result of that?
Maybe some of the gas taxes, like Senate Bill 1, the Road Recovery Maintenance Act, they're based on a per gallon. They're not based on the price of gasoline. So in those cases, the price of gas won't go up. We have seen that after, of course, during the pandemic, the amount of people, the gasoline consumption went sharply declined. We see it kind of, they see it returning to its previous levels, which was on a slight actual decline. But you know, with the rising number of vehicle gasoline consumption, actually. So while you would see a increase, I don't think a lot of the gas taxes are actually on a per price basis, so more on a per gallon basis.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So if there's no other questions, next we'll go over the projects approved for funding with the 2022-2024 CIP. To facilitate tonight's discussion, all CIP projects approved for funding have been separated into different categories based on the nature of the projects and the type of funding that would be used. Again, we would like this to be an open discussion, so please feel free to stop me along the way to ask any questions. First, we'll go over projects that would be funded through the gas tax revenue, which we just discussed. As mentioned earlier, staff anticipates receiving over $4 million per year in gas tax funds, or a total of over $8.4 million over the 2-year CIP. A total of 10 projects have been approved for gas tax funding, 6 annual street maintenance projects, and 4 standalone street improvement projects, with a total estimated cost of $8.36 million. Now, this first table lists the city's annual street maintenance projects. Standalone transportation improvement projects that would also be funded through gas tax revenue would be covered with the next slide. Street maintenance projects listed here are performed each year and are essential to maintaining the city's roadway infrastructure. Well, first on the list is the city's asphalt concrete overlay program, which includes our asphalt concrete overlay, slurry seal, and roadway patch paving projects. The second is the city's curb, gutter, and sidewalk replacement project, which responds to resident requests to repair damaged or uplifted concrete along city streets. Next, the street tree maintenance program is an important safety project in the city, trimming, pruning, and removing and replacing trees as needed along our city streets. Fourth is the city's traffic calming project, which performs evaluations and installs traffic calming measures such as speed bumps on streets for which residents have expressed concerns involving excessive vehicle speeds and which qualify under the city's traffic calming policy. Following is the city's accessible pedestrian ramp project. All of the intersections in the city do have curb ramps at each corner. However, due to ongoing updates to ADA requirements, some of those ramps do need to be brought up to current design standards. And lastly, the city's annual thermoplastic street striping project replaces or installs new pavement striping and markings on roadway locations outside the limits of our annual pavement maintenance projects. Total estimated cost of our annual street maintenance projects approved for funding is approximately $6.4 million for the 2-year CIP. Now, I mentioned next up are street improvement projects that would be funded through gas tax revenue. Street improvement projects differ from annual maintenance projects in that they are standalone, one-time roadway improvement projects. First is the Lindsay Tract Roadway and Drainage Improvement Project, which is currently in the design phase and budgeted in the CIP. However, based on updated cost estimates, staff anticipates needing an additional $1.5 million to completely fund construction of those improvements. The next 3 projects are traffic signal interconnect projects on 3 of the city's major arterial corridors: Cherry Street, Newark Boulevard, and Thornton Avenue. The project would install the necessary infrastructure, hardware, and software needed to coordinate the traffic signal timings along those corridors, improving traffic flow during peak periods. Now, in all, the street improvement projects approved for funding with gas tax funds total just under $2 million. And I'll pause at this time to see if there are any questions on the projects approved for gas tax funding.
So the interconnect, it's just to get it in my head. So like it would be set at like, say, 40 miles per hour. So if you're doing that, then you're more likely to hit the green lights. Is that
That's
kind of what
correct.
those are? Okay.
Yeah, so the project basically takes a corridor or a set of signals, say along Newark, like these Newark Boulevard from 84 to Civic Terrace right out here, and allows the signals to talk to each other so that they can coordinate and maximize the number, or I guess I should say minimize the number of signals that you stop at along that corridor. You know, we all get frustrated if we have the green at one signal and then the next signal is red. The interconnect project goal is to minimize those occurrences.
And then you said the traffic calming measures was just speed bumps. Is that?
No, so there's the city does have a traffic calming policy. Speed bumps is one of the measures that we use to mitigate speeds. It's actually one of the last kind of measures that we try to put in because they are disruptive to emergency service response. So when we do receive a complaint of excessive speeding on a street, the engineers will go out and assess the situation. A street has to qualify for traffic calming. We can't do it, of course, on our arterials. So we do focus on our local residential streets. A speed study is performed to see what the actual prevailing speeds are there. But you know, some of the measures are additional enforcement by our police. They do put out the speed feedback signs that you see there. Additional striping. Sometimes if a street is very wide and it doesn't have a center line street, that kind of encourages higher speed. So if we do stripe the center line, make it feel like the lanes are a little more narrow, that doesn't encourage slower speed. So there's a number of things we try before we put in the actual speed bumps, because again, some people like it, some people don't. It does impede emergency access response, so that has to be
I
in
thought
consideration.
the speed bumps had those
They do have the cutaways, that
for
helps.
the large ones.
Yeah, that
for like
helps.
the fire.
But if given the choice, I'm sure the emergency responders would rather not have to navigate through those to respond at the most efficient manner. So.
And then sometimes they put like raised dots down the middle of a residential. Is that a calming measure too?
Yeah, that's what I was mentioning when you put the center line stripe. If you're along a curve, the dots really help too, to give physical feedback to the drivers if you ever encroach over into the next lane. But any center line striping or narrowing of lanes kind of intuitively slows people down because they think they're driving they are driving in a narrower lane.
And if a street has those dots, and then over time the dots, I guess they come off, then they replace them? Or?
They do. They can be replaced.
Okay.
So maintenance, we do have an annual program like thermoplastic street striping that you see here, the last project, that is to address, new striping on the streets, or our maintenance department will go out and replace missing dots on the street as needed.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Just a comment, I'm glad to see that the Lindsay project is finally going to be fully funded.
It will require resident participation though, so through an assessment district. So we do anticipate going to the residents to do a outreach event for the formation of the assessment district. So the residents would have to approve the assessment district in order to help participate in the cost for full construction. Well, otherwise, outside of that, the project would be fully funded.
Thank you.
Okay, there are no other questions. The next are capital fund projects. Now, as mentioned earlier, after reconciliation of the Civic Center project, the estimated capital fund balance for the 2022-24 biannual budget is $4.95 million. $1 million of which will be set aside for unexpected project expenses, bringing the available capital fund balance to $3.95 million. A total of 23 projects have been approved for funding with capital funds, 8 maintenance projects, 5 new vehicle purchases, 7 operations projects, and 3 previously unfunded projects. with a total estimated cost of $3.28 million. First, we have maintenance projects. The first 5 projects on the list involve various improvements and replacement of equipment at the Maintenance Service Center on Filbert Street. These include replacement of the underground fuel tanks to comply with state water board requirements, construction of a new security wall adjacent to the railroad tracks, replacement of existing skylights and a tire changer, and the installation of a new security camera system. Next, the city has been without a playground surface material replacement program for 2 years. Through this project, all existing playground fall zones will be treated with new impact attenuating materials such as engineered wood fiber. A citywide tree pruning and removal project will establish a comprehensive program focused on pruning and potential removal of high-risk trees in parks and city-owned properties. And the last project listed will replace the submersible pump servicing the well at Newark Community Park. Currently, the pump is not operational, forcing the city to rely on water from the Alameda County Water District. In total, the cost of all capital fund maintenance projects recommended for funding is a little over $1.8 million. Next, we have purchases of new city vehicles. The first 3 purchases are for the Public Works Maintenance Division. In response to new bicycle facility improvements, such as the upcoming Cherry Street Class 4 separated bikeway project, a smaller street sweeper will be required to fit between the narrower space created between the concrete curb along the edge of the roadway and the new delineator posts that are frequently used to provide better physical separation between bicyclists and vehicles. Purchase of a new dump truck and tractor pull top dressing implement used for the application of various landscape material have also been approved. Next, we have the purchase of a new Polaris all-terrain utility vehicle for the police department. And last is the purchase of a new mobile recreation van for the Recreation and Community Services Department, which would make recreation opportunities more accessible to residents by bringing pop-up style events into the various neighborhood communities. Now, total cost of all recommended new vehicle requests is about $450,000. Next are city operation projects approved for funding through the capital fund. The first 2 were requested by the police department and include purchase of a 3D laser scanner for crime and collision scene investigations and handheld radios for police volunteers. And the next 3 projects come from the Recreation and Community Services Department. The first is a UV sanitation system for the Aquatic Center and Natatorium to disinfect the pools. Second is the renovation and replacement of the play structure, rubberized playground surfacing, and seating area for the Silliman Preschool Center. And lastly is the purchase of a portable outdoor movie system and portable outdoor stage for special events. Now last is a project to upgrade the city's financial system through the installation of additional software modules. Total cost of all new operational requests approved for funding, is $732,000. Next slide lists capital fund projects that were previously included in the CIP as unfunded projects, but have now been approved for funding with the 2022-2024 CIP. First project addresses state water control board clean water requirements at the service center associated with the fuel pump island. Next is phase 2 of a geographic information system project originally funded back in 1998. Yeah, phase 2 would fund necessary hardware and software upgrades, as well as provide GIS training for city staff from multiple departments. And last is the construction of a new room divider at the senior center. Now, in total, the estimated cost of all previously unfunded projects approved for funding with the 2022-2024 CIP is $280,000. Yeah, sure.
GIS system phase 2, is that a software program that's available for staff and for the public to go and check things like zoning, general plan land use, type in an address and pull up the basics from a land use perspective?
I believe that's a good question. That service or the availability is not currently available to the public. That is something that could be made available, and certainly something that we could look into, making a public-facing GIS system available on the city's website for residents to check, simple things like that. You would have to limit the amount of information that is available to the public, but certainly, zoning and basic information like that could be made available. So that is one thing that, one of the things that we would look into.
I've seen a few other municipalities in and around the area to where, I think it even says like GIS, I forget what the full name of it, but you can type in an address, and it's basics, this is the zoning, the land use. If it's in a specific plan, you can pull it, and then it's linked to the ordinance and just some basic text on what's permissible.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. You're welcome. Okay, so next slide. Although not approved for funding with gas tax revenue, one street improvement project was approved for funding with available capital funds. Now, traditionally, roadway improvement projects within the public right-of-way have been funded exclusively with gas tax funds. However, this does not preclude capital funds from being used towards these projects. The project would specifically address landscape and irrigation improvements within state right-of-way at the Thornton Avenue interchange on Interstate 880. Now, 3 projects were also approved for funding with community service facility fees, which are a type of restricted capital funds in that the use of community service facility fees is restricted to construction of new community service facilities identified in the 2017 Community Service Facilities Development Impact Fee Nexus Study. Now, total estimated cost of the 3 recommended projects, approved projects, is $490,000. As noted earlier, the projected fund balance of community service fees is $854,000. Now, this next slide goes into more detail about the community service facility fee projects that are approved. The first is the replacement of the city's fuel management system used to control access and track usage of fuel supplied through pump station at the service yard. Next, 2 projects address State Water Control Board clean water requirements at the service center associated with the fuel pump island and upgrades to the solid and green waste collection systems. So in total, the estimated cost of all projects approved for funding with community service facilities fees is $490,000. Now, that's a lot of information, so I will pause at this time to see if there are any questions on any of the projects approved for funding with capital funds. Nope. Not moving on. Next are park impact fee projects. As mentioned earlier, the city's current balance of park impact fees is approximately $3.6 billion. In addition, based on the amount of anticipated residential construction, staff again projects an additional $4.3 million of park impact fees over the next 3 years. Now, 2 park impact projects submitted for consideration were approved for funding using accumulated park impact fees with a total estimated amount of $150,000. In addition, a total of 7 projects from the Citywide Parks Master Plan were approved for funding with park impact fees with a total estimated cost of $2.6 million. This table summarizes the park improvement projects, submitted for consideration and approved for funding. First project is a request to install additional netting at the Mel Noon Sports Field Park synthetic turf soccer fields. The second project would install a permanent cricket pitch at McGregor Community Playfields, located adjacent to the Newark Community Park on land leased from the Newark Unified School District. Now, in total, the estimated cost of all park impact fee projects submitted for consideration and approved for funding is $150,000. This next table lists the projects from the Citywide Parks Master Plan approved funding with park impact fees. The first project is the reconstruction and installation of natural grass multi-sport turf fields along the back of the Silliman Center, between the existing synthetic turf fields and the baseball fields. This project is the only remaining priority level 1 project in the Citywide Parks Master Plan. Next on the list is the installation of sports facilities at Jerry Raber Ash Street Park. These improvements have been assigned priority level 2 in the Citywide Parks Master Plan and include construction of a new volleyball court, bocce ball court, and multi-sport grass field. Now, the remaining 6 projects make up the balance of what has been termed Phase 2 improvements at the Mel Noon Sports Field Park, with Phase 1 being the recently completed synthetic turf fields and skate park. These projects will be combined with the natural turf field projects at Mel Noon Sports Field Park described earlier. to refine and develop a comprehensive Phase 2 conceptual plan that could then be constructed once drought conditions improve, completing the planned improvements at Newark's premier community recreation facility. These Phase 2 improvements would include construction of a restroom and concession stand, playground, and group picnic areas, all listed as priority level 3 and 4 projects in the citywide Parks Master Plan. Now I'll pause at this time to see if there are any questions on the projects approved for funding with park impact fees.
Commissioner Aguilar?
Regarding the sports field, so the priority level 4, did I hear correctly, in terms of the next steps in processing, first, a conceptual plan must be processed and approved, and then once that's approved, the items then go for city council approval, then officially get funded?
Well, they're already funded for construction, but design and construction. But the next step, just like with any other project, is you would go back to the community, revisit the Parks Master, the plan, the conceptual plan presented in the Parks Master Plan. Say, hey, is there anything you want changed? Is there anything you want to add or take out? And based on that, the consultant or the staff that we bring on board would refine that conceptual master plan and then bring it to council for approval before final construction documents are prepared. So the construction documents would be prepared. A concern is, with the construction of that much turf fields, if drought conditions would allow, the maintenance of such fields. We do want to be good neighbors with Alameda County Water District. So if drought conditions don't improve by the time the construction documents are completed, it could be put on hold until we're, Alameda County Water District gives us the green light to go ahead and construct such a project.
Got it, okay, that makes sense.
Commissioner Fitz?
Yes, on the, good presentation so far. On the sports field park playground equipment, is that something that the public can weigh in on, the types of equipment that should be there for tots and that type of thing? Is there a procedure for outreach to find that out?
Yeah, no, sure. Like as I was discussing with Commissioner Aguilar, during the outreach meeting, that's the kind of questions that we would ask. It's just playground and equipment is such a broad term, so you're correct. Would it be for under 5 or toddlers or older children, or do you have a variety of equipment that can be used for various age levels? That's all the kind of questions that would be asked. How we do that is we schedule a community workshop or community outreach meeting. This one would, probably be at the Silliman Center itself, and invite the public and invite them to express their interests or their preferences.
Good. Thank you.
So I just have a couple of quick questions regarding some of these projects. Sportsfield Park Natural Turf Fields, is that refurbishing the fields that are behind the George M. Silliman Aquatics Center?
Yeah, so currently between the synthetic turf fields and the softball fields or the baseball fields, there are areas of grass, but they are, let's just say, in need of regrading. There's a lot of undulations and ankle twisters there. So we would basically regrade that area. There is one patch of dirt in between the grass field that would, of course, be regraded and turfed as well. So basically the stretch between the synthetic turf fields and the softball fields would be regraded and replaced with new turf.
Definitely overdue. Second question is, you have a sports field restroom and concession stand. So there's a restroom out there already. This will be a second restroom combined with a concession stand?
Correct. And the location it would be to be determined. Right now, the Parks Master Plan has it situated more towards the softball field. There is existing restrooms. It's located closest to Cherry Street, actually. And a lot of the people, the synthetic turf fields are very large, very wide. Right. So it is quite far away. This would put a second bathroom on the other side of the park. But, the exact location of the restroom and the concession stand would be, again, revisited during any community outreach to see where the preferred location would be. We would also work with, of course, Silliman Center staff, the people manning the concession. It would make sense, maybe to put the concession stand near either the sports fields or, the softball fields or something. So that's all to be determined.
Got it. Okay, last thing is not on this list, but I was out at Silliman Center a couple of nights ago. Looks like softball is starting up again, which I was glad to see. There's a netting that protects cars and pedestrians that is torn up, ripped up. I noted that it was already funded in 2020-21. When is that going to be replaced?
I don't have, good question. I don't have a specific date. I would have to consult with our Parks Facility superintendent to get a better date with you, but we can get that information.
Yeah, it's just the last thing you want, of course, is now that they're playing softball again, have a couple of balls come over, hit somebody in the head. And, especially since that project's been funded for the last couple of years.
Sure. We will get that information back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
So-
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, go ahead and continue.
Sure. So next are projects recommended for funding through the city's Community Development Maintenance Fund. Now, as discussed earlier, Community Development Maintenance Fund projects maintenance funds, may be used to pay for feasibility studies or master plans that are related to maintaining and updating the Newark General Plan, zoning ordinance, or other related regulations. The estimated fund balance for community development maintenance funds beginning July 1st, 2022 is approximately $4 million. Now, 2 studies related to the citywide Parks Master Plan were approved for funding with Community Development Maintenance Fund revenue, with a total estimated cost of $500,000. The first project is a request from the residents at the Sanctuary Village residential subdivision at the corner of Cherry Street and Stevenson Boulevard for the installation of new park improvements at their neighborhood park. Sanctuary Park was not included in the current citywide Parks Master Plan. Therefore, development of a conceptual park improvement plan or ranking of those improvements against other projects in the Parks Master Plan never occurred. Therefore, staff proposed funding a project to amend the citywide Parks Master Plan to add Sanctuary Park, develop a conceptual park improvement plan, and perform a prioritization analysis based on recommendations and input from residents and the surrounding communities. Citywide Parks Master Plan also identifies a future bike skills park at Birch Grove Park next to the existing tennis courts as a priority level 5 project. However, the Parks Master Plan also states that a final location for a BMX bike park would need to be determined through a future study. The second project listed here will further develop a conceptual plan for a future BMX bike park and perform a location study to determine a preferred location for the facility. And I'll pause again here at this time to see if there are any questions on the 2 projects approved for funding with community development maintenance funds.
Okay. I have one question about the Sanctuary Park. I assume that's that 3-acre park that was part of the Sanctuary Housing Project?
That is.
That's connected to the 6 acres, which we hope will be a new school site.
We
And
do.
then that park was going to be a joint use park between the school and the city.
Correct.
How will this conceptual design and master plan amendment, will that be determined? Will that be determinant of what improvements? Because right now it's just a 3-acre grass area and there's really
Correct.
there's no play apparatus or anything like that out there, so.
Yeah, improvements to the existing neighborhood park are limited to turf and basically trees. So there's no other amenities at that site. So the development or the addition of this project to the CIP, one of the first steps would be to develop a conceptual plan to install further enhancements, amenities at the park. It would have to be, again, prioritized against other improvements in the Parks Master Plan as well. But input from the residents would occur. We would have to consult with the state architect, actually, for if it's compatible with a future school use, because we do want to make sure that school any improvements constructed at that park would be compatible with a future school should one decide to occupy the 6-acre site.
Yeah, the clock is ticking.
The clock
For the
is
school
ticking. We are actively working with the I believe, with the owner of the, well, the potential owner of that parcel. Sorry, the original developer, to explore options as to whether different schools may start.
Thank you.
There's no other questions?
Nope.
So moving on to next steps. In all, there are 49 projects funded with the 2022-2024 CIP at a total cost of approximately $15.7 million. Now, tonight, staff recommends that Planning Commission find the capital improvement plan and the projects listed in conformance with the general plan. And if the conformance finding is made, the next step would be to present the full biannual budget and CIP document to City Council on June 23rd for formal adoption. Again, staff recommends that Planning Commission find the 2022-2024 capital improvement plan and the projects listed in conformance with the general plan. Now, that concludes staff presentation, but I'd be happy to answer any additional questions from the commission at this time.
Okay, do commissioners have any questions for Mr. Aimee? Commissioner Fitz?
I was looking at some of the documents, the Central Avenue overpass over the railroad tracks. I see that's funded and it's underway, but when is that scheduled to actually begin construction? And when will they close Central Avenue?
That is a good question. It's a project that everyone has been waiting, certainly several years, to see started. We do have an update. Current design is currently underway. I'm not currently underway, continues to be underway after several years. We're currently working with PG&E on a lot of utility relocations that have to occur prior to the city getting in there constructing. We hope that PG&E, according to our latest discussions, would start relocating the facilities about a year from now in the summer of 2023. Hopefully they can get their facilities relocated by early 2024, which is when the city's project could then begin. But the first item of work on the city's side is to relocate water and sewer out of the prism of the bridge as well. So you'll see that work being occurred. So really, the construction of the actual bridge structure would be in late 2024, 2025. But we hope to start moving dirt, or at least PG&E getting out there to move dirt pretty soon, in about a year or so.
I did see a nice rendering, architectural rendering of the bridge over there. It looked really nice, too. It was on one of the council meetings. They gave a presentation. It looks pretty sharp. Looking forward to seeing that happen.
Yes, you and me both.
Commissioner Bogus.
We didn't mention it, but I was reading the arterial bicycle lane that they're thinking of doing. How is that going to impact traffic? Because I know when Fremont took away the right-hand turn lanes, it just made a mess out of traffic.
Yeah, one of the first projects that was born out of the arterial bike lane approved and funded project is the Class 4 Cherry Street Bikeways project, and that will add a buffer along both sides of Cherry Street from Central Avenue all the way to Stevenson, the city limits. And then there will be a buffer, and then there will be those bollards, those little green bollards in there to kind of provide more physical separation. We don't plan to eliminate any lanes with this project. That's what they're doing in Fremont. It's a little more involved. They'll eliminate lanes or road diet or remove a right turn lane sometimes. But this one would be simply to add the bike lanes and the buffer and the posts along each side of the road.
Oh, okay.
Well, this may be the final question. Closely behind the Central Avenue overpass, the Lakeshore Park Landscape Project.
Yes.
Do we have a start date on that project?
I do not have a start date. It's actually the construction documents are being finalized. So we hope, Public Works Department hopes to get that advertised for bid for construction shortly in the next actually few months. So very soon, by the end of we hopefully to get it out to bid for construction this summer.
Okay. Any commissioners have any additional questions?
Oh, you go ahead first.
The question
Well, then Commissioner Aguilar, go ahead and ask it.
The Lakeshore Community Benefits, I remember we had that in front of us a couple years ago, and that was to improve the walkways and sidewalk and grass there at the park? Was that the park project?
I believe the project that Chairperson Becker was referring to is around the boathouse, actually. So that would be the landscape improvements. I think that might include a little pathways, but I don't think it's around the entire park.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you know if it includes restrooms at the lake?
It does not. That project was actually brought up, recommended for funding with the CIP. This year's CIP, it was recommended, it was actually brought up for funding 2 years ago, and then again with this CIP. It was not approved for funding. However, what we will do is we will reach out to the Residents Association there, LARA, L-A-R-A, to kind of gauge the interest levels of a restroom there. And based on the feedback, staff will make a decision whether we could potentially fund that project as well.
Because I know a lot of people drive there, so you wouldn't be reaching those people with the survey.
Yeah, the Lakeshore Park is actually designated as a neighborhood park.
Oh, okay.
It's not a community park.
Okay.
So, yeah. But people do drive there. I can understand the draw with it being the lake, but the intent of that park was to serve the local neighborhood. So we would primarily reach out to the Lake Area Residents Association to kind of gauge their interest and their desire in having restroom facilities at the park.
I had one last question.
Go ahead, ask.
With the Silman Center, I noticed they were, in it was saying that's a huge electrical draw, like a huge charge for electricity at the Silman Center, and that they were going to do a little bit of improvements. But it didn't mention anything about possibly using solar panels in the parking lot. Do you know if that's going to be something they'll consider, like Ohlone has that?
Yeah, actually, there's a project that's going to be looking at all of the city's facilities and potential conversion to solar, including this building as well. This building was set up for it, but they would be looking at all of the city facilities to potentially do a switch to solar, like traditional solar panels on the roofs. But also, if you do have the open parking fields like we have right outside of Civic Center, potentially, installing solar panels over the parking stalls as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, outstanding report. Of course, before we move on, I need to ask if anybody in the audience would like to speak on item F1. Seeing not, Mr. Turner, do we have anybody on Zoom who wishes to speak on this item?
Not this evening.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to entertain a motion finding that the 2022-2024 capital improvement plan is in conformance with the city's general plan.
I'll make the motion.
Commissioner Aguilar, do I have a second? Commissioner Bogusich? All those in favor, raise their hand or say aye. Aye. Passes 4 ayes and 1 absent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go back now to public hearings, item E1, and it looks like staff is passing out okay, so now that we all have a updated memorandum, I'm going to go ahead and, Mr. Turner, will you be giving the staff report or?
This evening,
Mr.
our
Tirion?
contract planner, Shweta Sharma, will be giving the staff report.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. I'll be presenting CUP U-21, item E1 regarding a application to request a new telecommunications facility. The agenda tonight will go over the applicant's request, the location of the project, the zoning of the project location. We'll look at the site plan and rendering of the facility, go over the required findings for the CUP and the wireless facility, the CEQA analysis, staff's recommendation, then we'll end with questions. So the city has received an application to construct a new monopole at 35360 Fircrest Street, which is located in the Business and Technology Park Zone. Surrounding uses include a school to the east, an industrial park to the north and west, and storage building to the south. Residential uses are located further south across Jarvis Avenue. There are 2 other monopine installations in Newark. This monopole is proposed to replace an existing 5263 Fircrest, which will be proposed to be removed as part of this application. The proposed monopine tower will be located at the rear of an existing public storage facility located on the northeast corner of Fircrest Street and Jarvis Avenue. The project includes installation of 12 panel antennas, ground-mounted equipment, wrought iron fencing with a double swing access gate. The project will require removal of 3 existing parking spaces. However, the project applicant proposes to replace them with 4 new parking spaces. So we will result in a surplus of 1 additional space. The project is cited to ensure fire department access lanes around the structures. The project has been reviewed by all city departments and divisions, including building, engineering, and the Alameda County Fire. All departments and divisions have recommended approval of the project with conditions. The project meets all zoning standards with the exception of the rear yard setback. As you can see in the diagram for the location, the monopine facility will be located only 12 feet from the rear yard, with the equipment located 29 feet away. The required rear yard setback is 50 feet for the Business and Technology Park Zone. However, the Newark Municipal Code does allow a reduced setback if it further mitigates any adverse visual or other environmental impacts. Staff has concluded that this location is preferable as accommodating the required rear yard setback would make the facility more visible along Jarvis Avenue. As you can see, there are railroad tracks to the side of this facility, and it's surrounded by other BTP zones, and we feel this is an appropriate location for the facility and will ensure adequate fire access lane. As stated, this is replacing the existing non-stealth facility across the street at 35263 First Street. The project is conditioned to have the equipment removed at this location once the installation of the new monopine facility is been finalized by city departments. So there are 7 CUP findings, and all of those findings have been made in the affirmative. We do not, city analysis has ensured that none of the project components would create any safety or adverse impacts. And I wanted to clarify the required findings for the telecom facilities, which is also in relation to the memo that Art passed out. All of the findings were grouped together. However, there are 4 general findings, 4 findings for a facility that isn't co-located, which this facility isn't because it's a new facility, and then 2 additional findings for the setback reduction. Again, all of these findings have been made in the affirmative as well as further expanded upon in the resolution. This project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act per Class 1 and Class 3 for an existing facility and the minor alteration to land for the ground equipment. And it is staff's recommendation that the Planning Commission approve by resolution conditional use permit U-21-6 based on the findings and conditions provided in the draft resolution. I am available for questions, and I believe we have a representative from the applicant side over Zoom as well.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sharma. First of all, let's start with, does anybody on the commission have any questions for staff regarding this? Commissioner Aguilar.
Thank you, that was a fantastic presentation. I read in the report, so 2 questions actually, and they're tied together. I read in the report that the adjacent school had reviewed the plans and had no issues or objections. Is that still consistent?
At this time, the applicant provided the letter they sent to the school, and it was dated April 4th. So since that letter has gone out, there have been no communications from the school with city staff stating that they have any concerns or questions at all regarding the project.
Okay, and has the city received any other letters or applications from any other nearby residents or stakeholders for that matter?
No, the public hearing notice went out a little over 2 weeks ago and was also published as well. And to date, no comments have been received from the public.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing. And as we traditionally do, we do begin with the applicant. Do we
Yes,
have the
the
applicant via Zoom this
The
evening?
applicant is appearing via Zoom, so I will allow them to participate. Aaron, I believe that you are able to speak at this time.
Okay, thank you, commissioners and planning staff. My name is Aaron Delao with J5 Infrastructure Partners, representing AT&T on this project. I am kind of filling in for Pamela Nobel, who has taken this project from the siting stage all the way up until now. And this hearing just happened to land on a time in which she had planned time off. So I'm here to answer any questions that you might have. Planner Sharma did a fine job of presenting, so thank you.
I didn't get your last name.
It's Delao, Delao.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I do have a question, and it's just, I need to ask you, have you read the resolution, and do you agree with all of the conditions of approval?
I have read the resolution, and I've been working with Planner Sharma on some of the language in it, which AT&T cannot agree to at this point. Hopefully we'll work out something that works for both interests.
Okay, so did I hear you correctly when I asked the question about reading the resolution and agreeing to the conditions? You said you're still working out issues regarding the resolution?
Yeah, there's a condition in the resolution that requires the removal of the site prior to, it reads that the existing site shall be removed prior to the final permit issuance
Correct.
of the new monopine. So there's an issue with that in that we can't have the old site come down before the new site is built and up and running, because that would cause a gap in coverage.
Okay. Well, why don't we move through this and then we'll come back to that.
Okay.
All right. Does anybody on the commission have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Fitz?
Yes, would this be 5G compliant?
Commissioner
Yes.
Fitz? Oh, okay, good.
Oh, okay, good. That's all I had.
Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Aguilar?
Hi. Question regarding, so it sounds like there may be issue in terms of constructing and having a gap in service. How long will it take you to construct the new antenna?
Probably, I would say about 6 weeks from start to finish. There's two issues with the condition, the way that it's written. One is that AT&T doesn't own the current tower. It's owned by Crown Castle. So AT&T can't commit to any removal timeframe for the actual tower. They can only commit to removal of its equipment on that tower. I have confirmed with Crown Castle that their lease with the underlying landowner is set to expire in September 30th of 2023, at which point the landlord will not renew. And, but Crown they would desire to remove their facility as soon as AT&T is off of it, because they would be paying rent with no incoming revenue. The other issue is that we would need to build the site, get it up and running and integrate it into the network, and then pull down the equipment off the other tower. So there needs to be a certain amount of overlap, and I've suggested 60 days for that overlap, which would be sufficient for AT&T to tune up the site and then remove the equipment from the old site.
But however, if I heard correctly, it would not be AT&T that would remove the equipment. It would be the lessor of equipment. Is that correct?
On the old site, AT&T has its ground equipment and antennas and radios and lines on a tower that's owned by Crown Castle. So AT&T would remove its antennas and all the ground equipment and then stop paying rent to Crown, and then Crown would have to remove the tower. And that's per their lease agreement and probably per the conditional use permit that that site is operating under right now.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Any other commissioners have any questions? Okay. Does anybody in the audience wish to speak on item E1? Okay, seeing not. Mr. Turner, do we have anybody on Zoom who wishes to speak on this item?
There are no members of the public wishing to speak via Zoom.
There are none. Okay. Well, at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for any additional comments or follow-up or questions. And I have one, and it's a procedural one, because frankly, it's the first time in my career that I've heard, when I've asked that question or heard that question asked about reading the conditions of approval and agreeing to them, and I've heard a no. So we're kind of at a bit of a quandary here. I know there's some options that we would have. I'd be interested in hearing what staff has to say. It sounds like it's a big item because you don't want two monopoles or a monopine and a monopole in that vicinity and the old one staying up indefinitely without knowing that it's going to come down. So there's a reason I know staff made that a requirement. So what does staff recommend we do in this particular case if you want the commission to move forward and vote on this item?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Becker. I think I'll defer to Deputy Director Art Interiano, who's been working with the applicant this afternoon on this particular issue.
Thank you, Chairman, Planning Commission. To expand on it, since the applicant doesn't own, and that was our kind of original assumption, right, that they own the pole and the equipment, but since they don't, the condition, Planning Division Condition B, as part of Exhibit B of the resolution, says the existing AT&T wireless facility located at 35263 Fircrest shall be removed prior to final permit issuance for the new monopole facility at 35360 Fircrest. So it doesn't actually say the pole, although that was our intent, but it really only directs that the AT&T wireless facility, and we can just revise this simply to say the existing AT&T wireless facility equipment, and that other part of that sentence, I would just say it should be removed prior to planning final. Okay, and that allows staff to determine at the end of the construction, once electricity is turned on and they test it, we can then do the planning final and sign off on it. And then confirm, of course, that the equipment has been taken off of the other pole. Now, as you stated, it's correct. Staff does not want to approve or allow a second pole to be constructed so nearby to a new pole. That's the reason why we put co-location conditions on there. So the code actually says that if the existing pole is not active, meaning it doesn't have any equipment on it, within 60 days, the pole will be considered abandoned. So what staff will do in this situation is just monitor it so that no new equipment is put on there, and then that we follow through with Crown Castle to remove the pole. So that's what staff is going to recommend, simply that we, at least for this particular application, that we just revise Planning Division Condition B to just simply say that the AT&T wireless facility equipment shall be removed prior to planning final. And that should satisfy both of our needs for the applicant and for the city.
Okay, so just for clarification, looking at the picture, let's say existing monopole, what actually would be removed by AT&T?
I'll let the applicant explain that, but generally it's, well, I'll let the applicant explain in more detail. Is the applicant still there?
Aaron De La O, you are able to speak and respond?
Okay, so if we're looking at this picture, the building that has an aggregate side to it there with the gray box in the lower left-hand corner,
Yes.
that is AT&T's shelter. That would be removed, as well as all of the antennas up on the top of the pole, including the what are called T-arms, the things coming off the vertical pole to hold the antennas. So essentially all that would be left would be the vertical pole, and I assume the surrounding fence is probably Crown Castle's. Their obligation per the lease is to remove their equipment and restore the site to its previous condition upon the termination of the lease. And like I said, that termination is already set to expire, but in 2023. But as soon as they lose AT&T's revenue, they're going to want to do that so that they're not losing revenue by paying rent.
Okay. So you're basically trusting that the property owner, after the antennas are removed, AT&T's equipment's removed, that pole will be removed in some reasonable time.
According to the applicant, Chair Becker, it sounds like that the AT&T leaseholder is working on removing, essentially having the lease expire. And as Mr. Interiano mentioned, we would want to have AT&T remove the pole. However, if the pole does become inactive after 60 days, the city does have code enforcement options to be able to have that pole essentially removed because it no longer is an active pole. So even so, I think we can go with what the applicant is mentioning in terms of how that pole is going to be treated, certainly in the next 6 months. And then the city has the option to follow up with code enforcement if necessary after that. Thank you.
And staff feels comfortable with that slight change to the planning division's B condition of approval?
Yes, Chairman. We think that we should do it.
Okay. Any commissioners have any comments or concerns regarding that? Commissioner Aguilar?
I guess a couple questions in terms of just tying performance to make sure the pole is removed. Has staff reviewed or do we have any daylight on the existing lease of the current pole that we're looking at that ties performance to the landlord removing the pole once that lease is terminated? Has anybody reviewed the lease, or is right now just taking the applicant's word for it?
We haven't reviewed the lease. I'll look over to staff to see if they have as well, but we haven't reviewed the lease. Typically, the city